Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Yarn Ambassador podcast. Happy New Year! I feel like we've got to the stage in January where it's almost too late to start saying Happy New Year because New Year was a long and distant memory, and for most of us we've been back at work for over a week now, and holidays are a thing of the past and we are looking forward into January. So last time, Happy New Year. If this is the first time you've watched this podcast, thank you very much for spending the time to check it out. If you're a returning viewer, thank you for coming back. My name is Charlie. You can find me as Yarn Ambassador on Instagram, which is where I'm most active, and Chellis on Ravelry. And if you wanted to get in touch, you can drop me a line at yarnambassadorpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find the show notes and the blog addition to this podcast at yarnambassador.com. So normally what I like to do is showcase the work of an independent yarn dyer or doer from the United Kingdom. Over the past year, I've been looking at the works of independent yarn dyers, what bases they use, how their work's knit up, how they work with colour, what inspires them, and I hope to continue doing that in 2018. With Christmas knitting and with kind of other commitments that I've had, I haven't been able to work on one single dyer at the moment, so this isn't the regular showcase of an independent yarn dyer or doer, but I hope to resume that for the next episode. I've got a couple of really exciting independent dyers lined up who I'm just itching to get started with their yarn, but again it's a question of time and management of knitting projects, as well as real life, which tends to get in the way, doesn't it, of the knitting. It would be lovely if I could just put the work life to one side and just play with the knitting, but I can't, and essentially that's what I've supposed to have been doing over the Christmas period. But like I said, there were Christmas knitting. I ended up knitting a pavement sweater by Vera Valimaki for my sister, using stranded dye works in the spook colourway, which was gorgeous. It's a very subtle tonal grey, and I think it should be really wearable. As you can tell, I love pavements. This is my pavement sweater from in the Aria colourway from down Sheepy Lane. It was the first sock weight sweater I ever knitted. This year has very much been the year of the pavement sweater for me. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you will have seen my trio of pavements, two of which were using down Sheepy Lanes, and then the final one with stranded dye works. So that was one bit of Christmas knitting, the pavement sweater for my sister, which went down really well. My mum also requested a sleeveless cardigan. She has one that she wears to death, and she wanted one in a different colourway. So I found a pattern for that. I think it's called the Magnolia sleeveless cardigan. I'll insert an image of it here. Thank God it didn't have sleeves, because if it had sleeves, I doubt I would have finished on time. But she's really pleased with that. And then I also managed to make a pair of socks for my dad. So it was a busy Christmas period. And on top of that, I had committed to a test knit, which I still haven't finished, but I'll show you the progress of that. And also I got swept up in the Adventurous wrap by Amber O'Brien, which is a gorgeous knit-along that she designed so that you could do one each day of Advent and have a lovely piece by the time you get to Christmas Eve. Unfortunately, I didn't finish mine on Christmas Eve. I finished mine just at the end of December, which was nice, but I'll talk about that in just a second. The focus of this month's pod blog, I suppose, I wanted to be about kind of frugality. January's the time of year where we all try and go on various diets, yarn diets, make promises to ourselves that we're not going to buy any more yarn and we will only knit with what's in our stash. And I'm always full of those good intentions. Not that they always work out, and knowing that I might go on a yarn diet in January. I don't like the term yarn diet, by the way. I don't know what else to call it. Self-control when it comes to buying yarn, perhaps. But knowing that I was going to be a bit stricter with myself in January, I kind of went on a bit of a binge at the end of December. So I've kind of swelled my stash in anticipation of being frugal, which I don't think is quite the point. Oh well, I've got some lovely yarns out of it though, so well done me. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what you can do with your existing stash, or kind of eke out your existing stash to keep it interesting and exciting if you are one of those people who has decided to try and be a bit more self-controlled with the buying of new stash. So there are plenty of patterns that are perfect for those random skeins that you have. One of the things that I liked most about the fade epidemic that's going on at the moment, so it started with the Find Your Fade by Andrea Mowry, and she's since released a lot of other patterns which fade along with it. And the nice thing about those is that you can mix and match with single skeins of sock yarn that you might have in your stash. And I know we all do it. We see a piece, a skein of yarn that we can't help but have, and we think because it's sock yarn, it's okay, and we will make a pair of socks out of it at some stage. And then it's so beautiful and it sits there and it sits there and we never use it. But with Andrea Mowry's patterns, you can put those single skeins together and make either a beautiful garment or a beautiful shawl. This time last year, I worked on the Find Your Fade shawl. And I had done exactly that. I had bought, this is wool garn. I'd picked it up on a lovely trip to Stockholm, and the colours had just totally mesmerised me. And so I got one skein of each colour, not really thinking what I wanted to do with it. I just had to have the colours because they were so rich and the yarn was so soft. It's 100% wool. And finally, when the fade came along, I found a way to put them all together. So there were complementary skeins, but ones that I wouldn't have put together otherwise. And so now I have this huge, beautiful wrap. So the Find Your Fade series is a really good way of using up those single skeins. And also this year I worked on the what's it called? So Faded sweater, where I did a monochrome version out of all the greys, the single greys and blacks that I had in my stash. So that's a really nice way to use up multiple skeins at the same time and make a garment, but kind of also tuck into some of those solo skeins that have been sat there by themselves for a long while. So that's something that I will probably be returning to this year, the Andrea Mowry fades. There's a big cardigan that's come out, and I know there are a couple of other plans that she's got in the pipeline, so I'll be having a look out for those. But I am also the kind of knitter that I keep every last bit. So when I'm working on something like the So Faded actually called for 7 full skeins of sock yarn, but in fact at the very ends you don't need a full skein, you only need a little bit, and so it's perfect for using up that little bit of scrap yarn that you have. And I have lots of these kind of semi-skeins that I've rolled up and are left over. And I found quite a few patterns that are really useful for using up those ones, because you can't get a single project out of one of those little balls. Maybe you could, maybe a little baby hat or something like that, but they fit very nicely into a faded, or there are a couple of other patterns that I've found. The first was one from last year, which is called the Mini Madness Shawl by Angie Kimmel. I'll put that on the screen. And this is a lovely crescent shawl design. I think I've shown this before, with its garter stitch with a little bit of lacing. And essentially you can just change in and out of yarns until they're finished. So there was a tiny little bit I used for the end, and then tiny scraps I used going all the way through, and it's made kind of quite a complementing rainbow, which I'm really pleased with. And I'm kind of, every time I wear this, I'm mesmerised by it because I love how the colours merge into one another. Angie's employed that same kind of fade technique, so that it's not an abrupt colour change, that you're kind of merging them together. And so it makes some of those skeins that you might not have wanted to put directly next to each other, you can merge them into one another, and it seems a lot less abrupt. So that's one of the things I do with those little bits I have left over from other projects. The other is one I mentioned earlier, which is the Adventurous Wrap. This is a pattern that Amber O'Brien released at the beginning of December. It was a knit along, and it's a really clever construction. You create 2 triangles and then you graft them together, and you have this big squishy long wrap. And that was perfect. There were 2 options. You could either do it with 12 mini skeins and a full skein of a complementary colour, which is what I did, and used grey as that kind of main colour to bring them all together. Or you could use it with 24 mini skeins and just have them merging, and there are some beautiful examples of what people have done with them. And it makes, I just want to talk a second about this construction, because it's 2 triangles put together. I'll try and lay it out. It makes a really squishy bit around your neck. So you've got a full rectangle around your neck, and then the tails are just these 2 triangles. So actually you have the bulk where you need it, which is up around your neck, and then it's a little less bulky, but it fits perfectly around for the tails. So that's a really lovely pattern. And what I really enjoy about this pattern is that it's become a kind of a memory piece for everything that I have done this in 2017. So as I was working on it, I can see socks that I've made. I can see more socks that I've made. That dark piece went into my So Faded. And because I've been working with independent yarn dyers this year, showcasing their work, it's a really nice piece that puts all of their work and all of their colours together. I did try and choose colours that kind of went together. So that's another really nice idea for using up those tiny bits of scraps that you have. The other one is that is making scrappy socks. I have loads of sock yarn left over, and sometimes really tiny little bits that I'm not quite sure what to do with. And so last year I actually made it was 2016, so December 2016, I gave myself another Advent project, which was Advent socks, and each day I would knit a little bit of my sock out of different yarns that I'd used, and I'll insert a picture of those socks here. They're actually in the wash and drying right now, so I can't show them to you, but I really loved the idea. It's a kind of scrappy sock. Not many people see your socks. It's a great way to use up everything you've used that year, and again it kind of serves as a memory piece to remind you what you've worked on. And I started doing the same again actually in the middle of the year, and I've only managed to get 1 sock of it done, but this was using intensely striped pieces that I got left over, and some quite hyper neon bits. One of my best friends just loves neons, and so the very bright neon-y bits are from socks that I've made for her. But they're quite fun. I think they're quite fun. Nobody really sees your socks, but it's good to have jazzy socks on underneath because they can brighten up your day. So that's another idea of what you can do with your scrappy bits. If you're looking to make garments, obviously there are hundreds of ideas that you can use cozy memory blankets, the granny stripe blankets. I did try on a cozy memory blanket, but I don't know if I've mentioned before, I need instant gratification, and a cozy memory blanket I know is something that is the work of many years' love and toil, and I like to be able to have a scarf or a jumper or something that I can wear straight away rather than having the squares languishing. So I did actually start them, and I do have a couple of squares, but I know it's not going to go anywhere. So I ripped it out, and I'm using I've just put the minis elsewhere. I also wanted to talk about how I store those kind of scrappy bits. I'd love to say that these are the only scrappy bits. Look, I got a yarn bowl for Christmas. How brilliant is that? And it's so delightful for storing stuff in as well. Looks very pretty. But yeah, I've been using that lots. It's hand carved, and I don't know where it came from. My friend Jo is just very clever and picked it up at a craft market. But I have a lot more odds and sods hanging around aside from that. And rather than keeping them in a bag where I can't see them or I have to go rifling through them, I like to have them out on display, but in a way that isn't messy and that I can see them and appreciate them. And so I found these Kilner jars. In fact, these were, I think, a Christmas present to my fella from me because he said he was going to make pickled onions. And he never did. That's fine, because I don't really like pickled onions, but I do love yarn. And so, I don't know if you can see from the reflection, but I've just squished in all the bits that are left over, so I can see what's in there. And those sit on my mantelpiece, and they look quite fun. And then every so often I can pop it open and pull out some of those mini skeins, the leftovers. They're not, some people put them back into mini skeins because they look pretty, but they're a bit of a faff, I find, to work with. You have to ball them up. So if they're already balled up at the end of a project, I just leave them balled up and shove them straight in. So I have 2 Kilner jars. I have one for DK weight, which I have quite a few scraps in. I generally tend to make scrappy hats out of the DK weight, and then loads for the sock weight yarn as well. So those 2 sit on my mantelpiece, and I think make a lovely and colourful decorative addition to the room. Other people might have something to say about that, but we don't listen to that. So I keep all of those bits, but I'm even worse than that. I'm not very good at throwing anything away. So I started saving even the smallest tiny bits of yarn that, you know, when you get to the end of a row and you know it's not going to be enough to take you on, so you think, okay, well, I'll just stop here and add in a new ball of yarn. Rather than lose that yard, meter, whatever it was, I decided to keep them. And I was inspired by a pattern that I saw on Ravelry as I was browsing through, which is called Fiddly Bits, and is by Jane Pehota, who's Hip Knitters. I'll put it on the screen. But anyway, the pattern, and I'll put a picture as well, because it just looks so much fun. And what she suggests doing is creating your own yarn ball over those little bits that are left. And so this is what I've got this year, and you can see this is a piece of the grey yarn that I've actually used. That was from my from my pavement, my spook pavement, and I think I'd probably used this as an spare waste yarn. But rather than throw the waste yarn away, I had kept it. And so what I do is I tie them together. And she says not to worry about the little knots and things that you'll get. See, there's another one. Is because her pattern, which is a free Ravelry download, is basically an infinity cowl. So you use a provisional cast on, and then you knit in the round. And because you're knitting essentially a big long tube, you always make sure those knots are on the inside. And eventually you can loop it together and you've got a big long circular tube, and it's a kind of scrappy mess, and I think it looks really, really nice. I'm hoping mine will turn out as well. So I've got quite a lot there, and now I'm quite fastidious about making sure I save all the scraps. Obviously, if they're only an inch long, and I've cut them off woven in ends, I'm not keeping those. They're the ones that I can actually get a decent wind or two out of. So I must have about 40, 50 grams there, which is fun. So that might be something I start working on later this year. And the nice thing is you can just keep adding to it and adding to it. So I have, again, one for sock weight yarn and one for DK weight yarn, which is a bit smaller. But I'm quite looking forward to doing that. I love the idea of getting something out of not very much at all. And these are bits that otherwise would have been thrown away. And so at the end of the year, or whenever I decide to start working on it, I'll have something that essentially is for free, which is good, because that's what the whole podcast is about. It's about kind of getting stuff out of the little bits that are left over. So I don't go any smaller than that. When I do cut off the ends, when I've woven them in, I do actually bin them. Actually, I don't. That's a lie. If there are loads of them, I scoop them together and I have a bag, which is upstairs, I've just remembered, which I plan to use if ever I needed to put stuffing in a small toy. So yeah, God, I don't even throw those away. Maybe I need to look at throwing those away. But if anybody else has got any ideas of what to do with the tiny 1 inches, because, you know, they're beautiful, especially when you've cut pieces, cut the ends off and you have this pile of lovely coloured yarn. Even though they're only 1 inch, it seems a shame. I think I probably need to get over that and just bin them. So those are some ideas of what you can do with yarn that you already have in your stash, little bits of leftover stuff, how to store them. I do have other plans for 2018. Like I said, I'm really hoping to get back into being able to showcase the work of one independent yarn dyer. At the moment, I'm working on a test knit, which I hope to be finished either today or tomorrow. It's by a lovely lady called Simone Carite, who is Owlcat Designs. You can follow her on Instagram and find her on Ravelry as well. And she has designed a beautiful lightweight cardigan. I think I showed it on the last episode, although I hadn't got very far. And she has designed a sock weight striped cardigan. It's called Hauch, which I think means breath. It's kind of to illustrate how light it is, and it's going to be a wonderful lightweight spring cardigan. Where have I put it? One moment, please. So, this is the test knit, and I am so very nearly there. As you can see, it's got these beautiful complementing stripes, and then in the main colour, it's got this twisted rib. Now, this isn't showing up very well because you might notice I'm using the same yarn as the one I'm wearing, which is an error. But I will try and put some photos in when I've finished it. It's going to be a really nice piece. I've just got this one sleeve to do. I am switching between the Aria colourway, which I'm already wearing, and another one from down Sheepy Lane, which is called Kingslayer. They were all part of her Game of Thrones club from last year. And that's a kind of flecked white and touches of cherry red and browns and golds. It's beautiful. So that's been a really enjoyable test knit to work on, and one I think that I'm going to have loads of use out of. Again, that just uses, I think it's 2 skeins of the main colour and 1 skein of the contrasting colour. So again, a really good project to use up some of those sock yarns if you have them. in those quantities. But check that out. I think that's going to be released at the beginning of February. I am a bit behind with my test knitting, so shame on me. But yeah, that is nearly finished, and I'll hope to post some pictures or show you next time the finished version of that. The other plan that I have for this year is from the first edition of Lane magazine, which I love, and from a designer that I really love as well, which is Vera Valamarki. And this is the Pieces of Silver, wrong way, Pieces of Silver sweater, which has got a big roll neck cowl. It's slightly cropped. I don't know if I'm going to do it slightly cropped because I'm very tall and I have an issue with cropped things because I think I spent a lot of time when I was growing up wearing stuff that was slightly too small for me. It's the same with sleeves as well. But this is a gorgeous, cozy looking sweater. So I think I'm going to, and it's loads and loads of stockinette in the round, which is my favourite thing to do, stockinette in the round. I've discovered I don't like sleeves so much, really don't like sleeves so much. But what I'm going to make that sweater in is hopefully one of the dyes that will become a showcase for me this year. And that is the beautiful River Knits. Now this is one of her yarns. Can you believe she dyes all her stuff on a longboat, on a canal? How do you even begin to? Unbelievable. But this is a colourway called Home is Where the Hearth Is, and I met her at, where was it? Yarndale in Skipton, and bought quite a lot of her yarns. So that is what I'm hoping will turn into a sweater of some sort. I did think it was probably going to be another pavement, and then I thought, come on, can I really do another pavement? Sorry, somebody just tried to break into my housemate's car, which is just parked on the road there, which is interesting and a bit scary. We live in quite a dodgy area. Anyway, so that's going to turn into hopefully the Pieces of Silver sweater at some stage. And aside from that, I don't have that many plans. I need to make some more socks because I don't have enough socks for me, so I need to work on that. But then, yeah, some more sweaters. I've got quite a few sweater quantities of yarn that I need to work through, and hopefully I won't buy any more stash. Some of the ones I did get before Christmas, because I knew January was going to be a frugal month, was some Owl About yarns. This is a lovely black and grey. She's got some beautiful kind of tonal purples as well. And look at this one. Really scrumptious. So I'm hoping to get some socks out of that. And the other guys I wanted to mention were Gam Farm Rare Breeds. When I was at Yarndale, they were sweet enough to give me one of their, what they're calling Yorkshire Lopi. So it's their take on the Icelandic Lopi. And I don't know if you can see, but it's a kind of single ply, but it has a very thin thread that kind of goes through it as well. It's plied with a very thin thread, and they have that in all sorts of different colours. So they have a red thread that goes around, which gives it this kind of ever so slightly pinkish hue, and I think that's a kind of an Aran weight yarn, but it smells super sheepy. And so that is Gam Farm Rare Breeds. So thank you very much for that. That is something I think I'm going to knit into a hat straight away, and it's 100% wool, reared, sheared and spun in Yorkshire. So thank you very much for that, and I will keep you abreast of how I get on with that and all the rest of the knitting plans that I have. I've got quite a lot of travel coming up in January and in February, which means a lot of time on planes, which is good, but then also a lot of time working, which is also good, but it means less knitting time. Boo. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been interesting and useful for you. If you have enjoyed it, please give me a like, and if you want to see more of my content, don't forget to subscribe, and then you can see when a latest episode has been released. Hope to see you around. See you next time. Thank you very much. Bye bye.